Today we are talking about tarot modification. Once it was a prerequisite for people to create and make their own spiritual magical tools. This would help you forge a link or a bond with that magical tool, as well as teach you some deeper aspects of spiritual development. Even though I'm a huge advocate of making your own tools, making your own tarot deck kind of requires a lot of artistry and skill. So instead of creating a deck from scratch, how about modifying an already existing tarot deck so that you can make it a little bit more personal? This is what tarot modification is. Tarot modifications are a great way to get more out of an old deck, and here's a two-part episode on why you should modify a deck and an instructional video on how to do just that. Hello, welcome back. So we are talking about tarot modification, and in this episode we are looking at why you might want to do it and what exactly it entails. In the next episode we're going to be actually modifying a tarot deck, and we're going to be modifying the Thoth Deck here. So before we get on to why you might want to, let's look at what it is. I have categorized tarot modifications into kind of three main types. One, trimming, where the edges of the tarot card are removed in some ways, they are cut down. Two, edging, where the edges of the cards are modified or personalized by coloring them. And three, annotating or modifying the front artwork of the tarot card. Each of those have a different reason why you might want to do it, so let's take them in turn. So let's look at trimming or cutting the edges down on a tarot card. There was a tarot deck that I recently reviewed called the Tarot of Leonora Carrington, and I had one major issue with it. Let me show you what I mean. So this is the Tarot Deck of Leonora Carrington by Fulgur Press. The backs I wasn't too keen on. They're a bit standard and grey for a kind of limited edition, but the major issue I had was on the front of the card. The major issue I had was these white borders. I felt that, and I still do feel that, they detract from the artwork of Leonora Carrington, and I don't think that they've added anything into the card. I know why they've done it. They've added the names to help cartomancers or people use the tarot cards in a reading way, but unfortunately I think it's detracted from it. It's kind of separated the reality of the card with the reality of ourselves, and therefore made it one of object and viewer rather than a kind of a combined experience. And that's because this white border kind of either looks like a picture frame or a window that separates the reality and the experience of that card from us. And the white is an interesting choice because white doesn't really appear in the artwork, even when one of the cards kind of does feature white. It's kind of like this off-white buff tone. And so it was just bizarre. The typography I think is poor. It doesn't really relate well to the card. They've used a serif font, whereas the numerals that Leonora Carrington has written aren't really serif. They're just kind of plain. So yeah, I wasn't a big fan of it. So cutting it off would be an option and would make the card feel a lot more immersive. My initial feeling is that Leonora Carrington designed this card to be meditative and to invite you in to experience the art. And this border kind of separates you away from that. So by cutting it off, it would kind of create it much more immersive and allow the reader a different experience. And we could cut it off in three different ways, a few different ways. So we could cut off the three edges here and leaving the bottom proportion, so we've still got the name. That would certainly help. It would make it slightly more immersive. Let me just top it off the edge so you can kind of see that it's just changing the effect of that. But you know, it still leaves a bit of the border. We could cut off all of it, so we are just left with these almost square tarot cards. Or alternatively, we could trim it just to leave a little bit of a white edge and take it away. I'm not doing that. Why? because it's a limited edition, and I don't want to ruin a limited edition tarot, and it's got a lovely gilt edge down the side. So by cutting them away, I would destroy this deck. I won't really want to modify a limited edition. It's just something that I wish the publisher had taken into consideration when they produced this tarot card. So otherwise, I would consider doing it. So for example, here is the Visconti Sforza deck. The Visconti Sforza deck is a historical deck, and the publishers have added this border in that has the name of the tarot card in 5 different languages and the number here. It doesn't really add anything, and you might want to remove this border so that you get a more of a feel of reading these cards as historical items rather than a reproduced item. So cutting it off might kind of give you a better feel of the original deck in its original state. So you can also see the same kind of thing in this deck, where the designer has used this kind of off-white ivory buff colour for the back of the card, and then unfortunately it's got this white border on the edge. So removing this will kind of be more in keeping with what the artist kind of originally aimed for of this deck, and it's not got a gilt edge in any way to do it. And here again on the Rider-Waite-Smith, it's got a crisp white edge, but the artwork is fully contained, including the titles on this deck. So you wouldn't be removing anything even if you just removed that white border. Yep. So removing a border, if it's horrible, is one reason, as well as making the deck more immersive, especially in the version of these kind of style cards. So immersive decks and horrid borders. The other reason why you might want to remove it is that the edge is battered. So I've had this tarot deck for about 15 years now, and I've had read off and on it, and occasionally brought it to events, especially because it's gold. It looks great at night. But 15 years where you can kind of see the edges are getting a little bit tatty and damaged. Yeah, you can see the notches in them. So by removing the edges of this, I might kind of give it a new lease of life. So if you've got a second-hand deck, or you've inherited a deck somehow and it's got kind of worn edges, or even dog earring on the corners, you could kind of cut them down to kind of give it a new sense of life, a new lease of life. I won't really be doing that with this deck, but I could, especially if it started to kind of get really seriously dog-eared on the edges. So those are the main reasons why I might want to remove it. The other type of trimming is where you're actually changing the proportions of the card. So one reason you might want to do that is if it's too large. Like here it's quite wide, so I might just want to remove the edges just so that it's thinner and easier to shuffle. Another way that I have seen that's quite interesting is that you can change the proportions of the card. So you could cut these to be exactly square. You would lose some of the artwork, but in the Rider-Waite-Smith, this artwork is so iconic that you would be able to tell which card it is even by a small proportion of it, especially if you read this deck a lot. If you are new to the deck or it's a weird deck, you probably won't be able to, but for something like this, you could cut it just so that it's square or even round and circular. This would allow you to read the cards in a different way. This would give you 4 different interpretations of each card, where a card could be upright or reversed, but it could also be left or right facing. So there are some tarot decks that are designed to do that, especially the round circular tarot decks. So you could consider changing the proportions of the deck, and therefore changing the way that you can read it, and improving the way that you read it in a different way. So those are the main reasons why you might consider trimming the edges of the card down. The next one is why you might want to edge the deck or colour the edge. This one's merely cosmetic, but it does have a good place. So you might want to, as you know, when cards are produced, they're cut. Not many publishers would do much with this edge. They won't tend to colour it. On some editions, you'll kind of get them gilt, but it's still pretty rare for anyone to do the edge of a deck. So if you undertook to colour it yourself, you can really improve the look and the feel of the deck and give it an extra special depth that would not normally be present on a mass-produced deck. So one place that you might want to do it is a deck like this that has black edges, but yet when it's cut, it's left this white edge. So colouring this edge black, these edges black, might just make the designs pop, and when you're holding it together, just make it look a lot sharper and more high end. You could even kind of colour it to be a contrasting colour, like a red, a kind of a sexy red down the sides, and therefore kind of change the way that deck feels. So another reason why you might want to colour the edge is if you wanted to colour them different colours. So you could split the deck into the suits and colour the edges of the suits in different colours, for example elemental colours. You might want to do it in a specific colourway, so different shades of blue, light blue for air, dark, deep blue for water, etc, etc. And the major arcanas in a different colour. Or you could do the major arcanas with their elemental associations. This would look quite cool on the edge, but also if you can just see it as you kind of lay the card down, you can see that white edge there. So you'll be able to see which element it is by looking at the edge of the card without needing to draw or write it on. So that's a pretty cool way that you can kind of modify the edge of the card, but this is really quite cosmetic. It's not correcting an issue, it's not changing how this card deck reads, but it is making it a little bit more stunning and a little bit more personal. So the last part is modifying the artwork of a tarot card with marker. So the only other type of mods that I've seen is drawing on the tarot card itself. This might sound crazy, but there's certain times when you might want to do this. So for example, I have seen someone modify a tarot card. I can't remember which deck it was, but the tarot card has a businessman with quite blonde hair, and unfortunately it reminded the reader of a certain American politician. So in order to not keep reading that deck and thinking of that certain American politician, they kind of coloured the hair in brown. They got a Sharpie pen in brown and they coloured it to make him look like a brunette, and therefore corrected the problem. That is one suggestion, but there could be lots of little tiny things on cards that you want to change. So this yellow man's yellow hair could be something that you want to change. You might want to change it to red, but equally you might not want the colouring of this lightning bolt to be yellow or these clouds to be white. You might want to kind of change those and modify those some way. And that's all possible. Obviously, anything you draw over the top will be influenced by the colour underneath, and you might not want to get the colour that you want. And you can't really use things that leave things on the surface like oil paints or a painty, chalky kind of marker. You'll ideally kind of want to limit yourself to something that is waterproof and indelible, such as a Sharpie pen, and Sharpies come in lots of colours. The other thing that you might want to do is you might want to modify some of the symbols on the card. So for example, I might not like this crux ansata, and I might want to make it look more like the Mars symbol. So I might just redraw it as a Mars symbol on top of a kind of a T, a tau T kind of shape. And this will help me know that this is Aries and therefore it is ruled by Mars, for example. I might not like this orb, so I might want to change that orb or blacken it out so it looks like a black stone, and therefore I'll remember that this is about earthly kind of practical matters, and he's holding a stone to show that. Or I might want to just draw new symbols in. So there's two big little white spaces here. I could draw symbols down here or associations that I want to kind of have, or just change the colour of beard or anything really. So those kind of ability to modify and add details on the cards are great, especially if you are learning a new technique like elemental correspondences or planetary correspondences. I'm doing a series on Patreon at the moment about planetary correspondences with tarot cards. If you're interested in that, please check out my Patreon and consider supporting me. Little got that in there. So you'll be able to kind of add those symbols on so that you can learn and use them more. And it's one of the things that I want to do with the Thoth, even though the Thoth naturally does this. I just want to kind of add. So let me show you. Not this, there you go. So here we've got Saturn in Leo, which shows us what decan it is in astrology, but I might want to put the word strife in the artwork, for example, or I might want to put its elemental association more clearly. I mean, obviously this is in Leo, so it's fiery, and it's obviously wands, so it is fiery, but I might want to just make it very clear by putting a symbol on all of the fire cards. Or putting keywords. You know, you might be learning the tarot and using a system of keywords where a keyword per card helps you kind of remember the meanings. You can write them on. You could even write the reversed meanings. And I've seen this on historical cards, so it's not like you're destroying a deck. I've seen this on cards that are in museums where someone has written the divinatory meaning on the top and then reversed the card and written the other reversed meaning on the bottom of the card. So you're not destroying a deck by doing this. You're making it easier for you as a tool and a spiritual device. So those are the reasons why you might want to modify the surface or the face of the card with Sharpie marker. So those are pretty much all the reasons why you may want to consider cutting or trimming the edges down, changing the colours of the edge and how to change the colours of the edge, as well as changing and modifying the symbols in the card. I am going to be doing an episode on modifying this Thoth deck that I hold in my hand. The reason why I have decided to do that are, I don't tend to use this deck. I really should, but I don't tend to use it. I want to adapt this deck to being able to use it for astrology style readings, tarot readings for my Patreon group, as well as here online. But I find these a little bit too large. I don't like the borders too much, and I think by cutting the borders off, they'll feel a little bit more approachable and easier. And I want to emphasize some of the symbols on the cards a little bit more so that I can kind of see them as soon as I'm reading rather than have to kind of look for them. So those are the reasons why. The last reason why I'm modifying the Thoth deck is that, loading issue, there you go, is that this has a lot of projectional geometry, which means that the lines project out of the border of the tarot. I'm just trying to find a good example of this. The best example would be the magician. The speaker, the devil. And you can kind of see these lines going out and across the borders. These line up with other cards in the deck. So this vertical axis, if you lay it out next to a card, it might join two cards up in an interesting way that can be read. But this border detracts from the ability to do that. So the fact that these lines can sometimes run across two or three cards is blocked by having this border. So I don't like this border here, and I want to see and experience these lines going across my reading when they kind of become relevant. I also want to kind of cut it down so it's a little bit more manageable to shuffle. And I've seen images of this modified, and it looks pretty cool. It looks very, very kind of immersive. The colours stand out more because the grey border obviously flatten the colours. If you put a bright colour next to white, it looks brighter. If you put it next to grey, it's not going to look so bright. So cutting these should make it a little bit more bright. So those are my reasons that I'm going to be choosing this one to modify, and I'm going to do all three. So I'm going to be cutting down the size of the cards, I'm going to be colouring the edges of the cards, and I'm going to be adding and modifying the surface of the cards. So stay tuned for that video. Thank you so much for watching this quick clip about modifying a tarot deck, and please consider subscribing to my channel and liking this video. Put any comments you want below, and thank you so much for your time. Take care. Bye.